Worf and Beverly enjoy a nice meal at Arudia 4 Cafe. The Enterprise gets a carpet change, and this is the year of the Irish unification. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 3, Episode 12, The High Ground, written by Melinda M. Snodgrass, directed by Gabrielle Beaumont. If this sounds like the first time a woman has written an episode and a woman has directed an episode at the same time in a Star Trek episode, you are correct. It is the first time ever. This was January 27th, 1990. We've got a very special guest, everybody. Can you believe it? One of the most exciting and action-packed episodes ever, thanks to Danger, Dennis Madalone, legendary stuntman and stunt coordinator. How are you today, Dennis?
Hey, great. Thanks so much. It's great being here.
So good having you again. Welcome back. Just to open this up, the rumor is that this episode came about two things. One was it was influenced by the Revolutionary War, and then later it was much more about the Irish situation that was going on in 1989 at the time, like the separation of Ireland and all that. But mainly it was that the executives said they wanted something with more action. They wanted a thriller. They wanted gunfights and laser beams and stuff like that. So this episode was created. So they're like, all right, Dennis, we need you. do you remember when you first saw this script or when you were approached or what your first impression was when you're like, oh boy, this is gonna have a lot of work on this one?
Yeah, TNG had its moments of action, but this one was like, oh, all right, man, now we got something. Sometimes I'm on episodes where I'm babysitting just some of the actors or we're just doing one stunt. But when I read the title of the script, High Ground, I said, well, I wonder what that means. And then when I read the script, I said, they should change the title to Hit the Ground because it was nothing back. And so I said, oh, we got Hit the Ground, High Ground. And it was just like cool action everywhere. And I always have my buddies with me that are just great stunt performers. And I almost got every one of them on that show because there was so much different action throughout the whole episode. So it was really cool to be on TNG where there was a lot more action.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis, can you walk me through what's the process of you developing coordination for stunts? You get the script, and then you kind of go through the whole thing. Like, what's the timetable involved with that? What's the process like?
When I get a script, sometimes I skip the dialogue and I get right to finding where the action is. And once I find the action, I'll bend the page and make notes, doubles, make notes, start to think of visualizing who I want on the team to come aboard on these particular episodes. And then I really do my homework and get everything off the script and on a stunt sheet saying, scene 23, double Captain Picard, blah, 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 blah. And then what I do from there is I call the director first before I call anyone, because if I don't know what he really wants, then I only know what I would like. And then there's things that what the producers are thinking about, but I already know, go to the director. I call him up. We talk through the script. He goes, oh, yeah, we'll get a double for Picard, and we'll get a close-up of Picard throwing a punch, and then we'll have the double tackling the double for that actor in that scene. And we just talk it all out. So when I go to a production meeting with my stunt budget and my breakdown, every time the scene comes up with a stunt, me and the director are totally in sync. So when we say, yeah, we're going to have a double here and double there, the producer and Mary Howard and Brad, they all go, oh, great, great, great. And so because I learned when I was 20 years old at Universal, coordinating my first show, I went to a meeting without talking to the director, and there was lots of stunts in it. And I'm just a kid, right? So I'm like learning on the job how to, do all this. And I'm in the meeting and we get to the stunt scene, and I tell the director, well, I just tell everyone in the room, the producers, everybody. I go, yeah, here we can have, 6 cars sliding, and then we can have a double. And the director, I'm waiting for the director to go, yeah, yeah. And the director goes, that's not what I was thinking. And we're like, oh, man. And then I go, what are you thinking? Well, maybe 3 drivers. And so he was still along with it, but I realized, wow. So after that whole episode, it went great. I said, I'm always going to talk to the director because he's the man at the meeting that nods yes. And then the producers go, okay, keep that in the budget. It's the director's vision. So since then, I always want to capture the director's vision and even give him more if he's open to it. He'll go, oh, that's even better. So it's really about getting in sync with the director and then making sure we can make budget with our producers and stuff.
Sorry, go ahead, Cirroc.
No, I just had one little extra follow-up on that. So you meet with the directors, you get the budget assigned, you call your guys up, and everything is going according to plan. Then at what point do you work with other with the effects guys for explosions and things of that nature? Does that happen on the set at the time, or is there a pre-walkthrough on where explosions are going to happen and the directions of things?
Yeah, pretty much in the production meeting, that's the first production meeting, and then there's, another one. But in between the two is the first one you talk about everything, the effects, where we're going to squib the guy for the hits, which we did a lot of squib hits on high ground. Mm-hmm. And then in between the gap of the 2 meetings, the one in the beginning and the one right before the show, like maybe a day or 2 before the show, we walk and talk, and we'll go to the set, and we'll walk and find out, we'll talk to the effects guy, if it's going to be, if we need his squibbing to be, we talk to the director where the scenes are going to be and where the actor's going to fall out of frame. So by the time we're really done prepping for 7 days, the director, me, and everybody else is like, all right, let's shoot, because we are so in sync. We're ready to go. We talked it. We walked it. We got everything lined up. Really know what we want. So when we go on the set, it's really magic. It's like just when that scene comes up, we know where the double goes in. We know where the actor comes in. It's just really magic. Everything is just planned out. And then now and then when you're on the set, you ad lib. And the director will go, oh, hey, Denny, can we do this? I go, yeah, let's do it. So you got to be ready to, you put together a great painting for everyone and be ready to add some more painting on it to really make it even better. So I love a director that comes on there and he even wants more on the day. He'll come up with something. But instead of, you don't want a director that's taking away. But I'm pretty famous for creating, making, getting what the director wants, but even more, make it really rich. And I remember one of my unit managers, Bobby D on Deep Space Nine, said to a new director that Dennis Madalone's going to give you a whole lot. You probably only need half of it, And he was right. I come in with all that. Let's do a big. And we're ready to give him a real lot. And by the time we're done prepping, we end up getting a lot of meat. But I remember my unit manager, that was a compliment. But he was letting the director know, don't let Dennis give you too much,
Everybody just listening in right now, you can't see this, but Dennis is wearing an awesome Greatest American Hero long sleeve shirt. He's also got a picture of himself on fire behind him and another Greatest American Hero image behind him. Great stuff. Love the Greatest American Hero. However, can you walk us through this scene a tiny bit? It kind of opens up the episode. Beverly and Worf, for some reason, are just enjoying a cafe on a mission. And they're like, oh, we're done eating. An explosion happens. You've got presumably three stunt people here taking dives. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do. And I remember it was me in the middle, and it was Mark Riccardi wearing the helmet, and it was Pat Tallman or Lynn Salvatore. They're both great stunt women. It was one or the other.
That might be Pat Tallman.
Yeah, I feel like it was Pat for sure. Just I can remember her being there, and it was a huge explosion, bigger than what they normally do. Normally we do something bigger than a squib hit explosion where they shoot cork, but that was a pretty big one. So I remember setting it up with my guys, saying that when this thing starts to go off, we have to really, take the hit, but close your eyes because there's a lot of debris coming. And it only takes one little something to get in your eye. And I remember the way we all flew, we were all in sync on flying the right way. So the debris was hitting the back of our head and the side of our face. And as we hit the ground, I remember Mark Riccardi was wearing the helmet. So he had it made. He had a helmet and goggles playing some kind of, guard. So he was wasted. But that was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And then for people that can't see, even when you're doing the reenactment right now, Dennis, there's a way that you flail your body when you get hit that it's such a performance way that is, I can see the stuntman in you ready for the camera shot, because you do. I remember you saying that on the set, prepping actors for taking hits, or to kind of sell the motions here and there. And you always used to give us those kinds of instructions prior to filming a scene where the actor himself was doing some minor stunt work.
Yeah. And it is, I just recently over the last few years, I realized that when I am working with the actors and getting them, I'm like a coach, pumping track kids at the track field in high school, because you got to pump them up, excite them, make them believe, tell them how good they look in the rehearsal. You got to feed them that energy, because some people are shy and they don't know if they're looking good, but I just feed it. I feed them and I build them up. And so every time a guest star comes on the show, I just pump them up. We rehearse them, we get them going, and just get them that energy. So it's always big, and you can't overact on these shows because they're big phaser hits,
Right.
And so I enjoyed all the challenges of all the new actors that come aboard, the guest actors, to start over, see what they have in them, see when I put the fight together, if they don't quite can give us the close-up shot, I'll tweak the fight on something else they could do to fit the guest star. So it's a great performance all the way around. So, sometimes I get an actor and he has a bad neck, and so I have to tweak the fight to adjust to the actor, or they can't quite throw the punch. So I'll change it to a stomach hit, because they can't throw a good face punch. So it's just really, doing all homework before we step in front of the camera, and then get them pumped up, and also know that as much as you pump them up, if it's a fight scene and two actors have to throw a punch at each other, you have to keep stepping in between takes to make sure they don't get over amped where they get too close and they clobber each,
Hey, Dennis, you sent a lot of really great information. I'd love to jump on some of this. So, a couple guys here. One of them looks very familiar. Does that happen to be you? And if so, who's this guy? Is it a buddy of yours?
Buddy, yeah, that's me on the left side of the photo. And you can always tell me, even when I'm a Cardassian or a Klingon, because I got the nice Italian nose, So I'm spot. And right next to me on the picture on the right, that's Kenny Lesko. He's my best friend. We trained together when I was like 18 years old at Paul Stater Stunt School in Santa Monica, California. And we became best friends. So when we exploded in the business, I took pretty much everyone in the gym with me, but especially him. And then he went on to stunt coordinate Pulp Fiction and all these incredible features.
Wow.
So it's great when you can have your buddies with you. And what's cool about that scene is Worf and Jonathan Frakes, they both jumped us from behind and beat the heck out of us. And so it's great it's great when you can get beat up with your buddy right by your side getting beat up. It's pretty cool.
Sounds like a bar fight.
I have another question for you, Dennis. There's something that we see recurring in Star Trek, and I wanted to know if maybe you deserve the credit for inserting this particular aspect of fight choreography. The two-handed punch. We see it many times used in different cases. We saw it in the episode before this, actually. The two-handed boom punch. Major Kira has used it before.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it used in several incarnations, and I want to know, can we credit the two-handed punch to Dennis Madalone?
Put a hold on that. Let me tell you what I did create. That I did take. That they embraced was when I started doing something with Worf. I came up with the, boom, the palm shot into the face.
He does that a lot, yeah.
It felt like Worf. It felt more like that, like a bear, and he looked like a bear with that Klingon gear, and so I think I probably back in my mind got that from a Bruce Lee thing from the early 70s or something, but. And then when I looked at it and he was throwing it for the first time, I said, man, this is cool. I ended up taking that with me on so many things. I let Cardassians use it, other Klingon, Deep Space Nine was one of my favorite moves. And then with Nana, I had her even do a strike. And then, I like Nana. I created like elbow strikes with Nana, and she loved it. But she looked so good at it. I made sure that when she fought, we always got elbow shots in there, boom, boom, boom,
Yeah.
And then, but this thing I took when I was a little kid, 5 or 6 years old in New Jersey. I was watching the original Star Trek, and William Shatner was doing he was beating up a big, funny looking costume alien. You could tell it was a big costume. It was just. It looked real back then. But if you look at it now, it was just a big alien costume, like a lizard man. And out of nowhere, that show was throwing punches a lot. So when I started doing Star Trek, I said, we're not going to do punches. This has got to be more like elbow strikes, almost like karate, judo, but not the kicks to the face, not sweeping kicks to the face. I felt it was more like all the arm action. But when William Shatner was beating up this creature, he was throwing punches, and out of nowhere he did the double, and then a double thing over the back of the neck. And the creature went down. And so I took that and I brought it back, because out of all the fight stuff from the original series, to me, I said that still could be used in the future. And I used everywhere on TNG and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. I just love the shot in the gut and over the back. It's something easy to show to the actors too and get great reactions. So, I stole that from William Shatner, and but I created the palm shot. So.
That's interesting.
Wow. It's good knowledge.
Yeah, it sounds like the key is you're creating things not just for stunt people, but for actors that aren't necessarily trained in stunts. Something like this, that's doable. You're not flailing a hand where you could go too far and clip somebody's nose or chin. You're not, throwing something. It's like this. It's a very controlled move for somebody that may not be super trained. So that's really cool and interesting. It's fun to know that actually was taken from Shatner fighting the Gorn. But here's a stunt person I think you mentioned. Either that or you showed Worf, Michael Dorn, how to dive back 5 feet while getting shot with a phaser.
Yeah, this is in this shot we used Michael Dorn's stunt double. His name is Rusty McLennan, a great stunt man. And Rusty, I love the first time I started using Rusty, because the minute he flies in the air, he's just a ground eater. And I'm old school. I like getting up, eating the ground, and obviously getting up afterwards and feeling good. You don't want to get clocked and hit your head. So I love Rusty's talent. He's great. He doubled Dorn for, all 7 years. And you know what? A neat story about that. Rusty McLennan is African American, but he's really light skinned. His hair was red. He almost looks like he's from Ireland, And so I brought Rusty in to double Michael Dorn for the first time, and they got him in the trailer. And Michael Dorn is like 4 chairs down, getting in makeup, and in goes Rusty. And he walks in and he goes, I'm the double for Michael Dorn, Worf. And Michael Dorn looked at him and he saw a white guy. And
He's like, what the
he stormed out of the room and went right to the phone and called David Livingston. He goes, I got a white guy down here, double me. I got a white guy. So David came down, and by the time David got there, Michael Dorn already talked to Rusty. And when Rusty went up to him and said, hey, I'm Rusty McClellan. He goes, I'm African-American. And he goes, what? He goes, I'm African-American. And they started jiving back. He goes, oh, yeah, that. And then Dorn looked at him and goes, oh, that's right. That is a fro you got. It's a red fro. And they just became best friends.
I love
it. And they showed up like, oh, my gosh. What did you do, Dennis? I go, I didn't do nothing. I go, these guys are best friends. And he goes, oh, my God.
But it's true. That would have been a very touchy and rightfully so situation. I could totally get that. But I do want to follow up on this scene just a little bit more, if that's okay, because you also sent this, which I don't think that's a stunt double. Is that did you teach Captain Picard how to swing at somebody on the bridge?
I was really proud of Mr. Stewart here, because he just threw a great punch. I mean, look at him. He's leaning, he's throwing his face, the energy. Yeah. I mean, he really sold it. And that's what we do. We just get him all pumped up, tell him how good it looks. And he really nailed it. That's a Chris Doyle. But when Captain Picard threw the punch from the front angle, we were on the actor's face. But they loved this angle better, where it was on the stunt double, which is Chris Doyle. And we see Picard throw the punch. That was the money. The minute they fly out of frame, we cut to a side shot where the stunt double is throwing the punch, and he falls right on top of the Chris Doyle's, he's the double that hit the ground. And so everything just really cut together really cool when you watch that episode with Picard. You can't really tell that he's not the one that landed on him, because we did the director did such a great job of getting a great angle of seeing Picard throw the punch and kind of go up in the air to cut to the two guys hitting the ground.
I had a question also, Dennis, about, sometimes you get an actor that, wants to do a stunt. And where is that line where you draw, where you say, you know what, we got to have the stunt guy do it. We don't want you doing it. Sometimes there's like a bravado there. The actor wants to do it and wants to, be the one doing it. Where do you draw the line and say, no, this is where I, like a medical doctor, have to kind of override?
Yeah, I never really had that issue. Even though sometimes we don't have a double, because it was just going to be a punch and then he falls out of frame into a pad. I just make sure that the actor if the actor's not the one that's going to be in a big explosion, or he's not going to be the one that hits the ground hard, I'll always I'll make the actor feel good. He'll take the punch and go out of frame and land on 4 pads that are like a big old bed with us out of frame, me and a few buddies spotting him so he doesn't miss the pad. And I'll get him, he sells the money shot, seeing the real actor go out of frame. And I'll let him know that now let our guy hit the ground, because this is what he's going to do. And the stuntman does a rehearsal. He eats the ground, and the actor usually says, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't work that hard. So the actors will let us get a lot of cool footage, but not let them be in, let's just say, the risky spot, hitting the ground, because we don't want anyone hitting their head. So we just got to be. So I've never really had. I've had actors on the phone before that I would call up, guest stars, and then they would say, "Oh, I want to do my own stuff," but I always bring in a double, and they always do about 40%, and then we do the rest.
Okay.
Hey, Dennis. That's smart. I just realized we only have about a minute left with you. But before we go, there was also one you mentioned. This was walking through the halls. You said one of your best friends was in this scene. He gets shot by one of the Chris Doyle gets shot, blasted by the stunt woman, Denise Lynn Richards. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, her name is Denise Lynn Roberts.
Oh,
and
Roberts.
she is She is a great stunt woman. She doubled Nana a little on Deep Space Nine, and she worked on a lot of Deep Space Nine other than TNG. So she's great. I used her and Pat Tallman a lot because they were both about the same body size. But yeah, Chris Doyle plays just an ND Starfleet guy, and he's walking. And Chris Doyle is the same thing. I went to the gym with him, with Kenny Lasko and all these guys. So it's great having him in there playing himself as a Starfleet, getting shot by another stunt woman, Denise Lynn Roberts. And what was really cool about that episode was we used Chris to play the part. There he is. And then we used him to double the actor that Captain Picard belted. So he got to be in 2 spots in the same episode, which is rare for my guys to do that. But for me, I sometimes I go in 3 or 4 different spots on the same episode because they're different days, you know. So I was a stunt hog. I loved just getting on camera everywhere. Just you know, I love performing. I love wearing the gear, and I'm still that way. You know, ever since I've been 18 years old, I love just going out there and eating the ground and doing cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we love you, Dennis. You are one of the most loved people that I've worked with. You always bring that A quality, happy, positive, good vibration type energy on the set. The whole pumping up the actors and making them feel good. You do that for everybody you're around. That's infectious energy, and really I want to say thank you personally, because it's a real pleasure to watch you build your career and watch you work. It's why you keep working. It's why people love you.
Hey, Cirroc and Ryan, it's easy for me to show up and have that energy all the time because I get to show up every other day and I get to wreck the set, break things, beat people up. And afterwards, I don't have to pay for anything. It's all free. I get to they pay us to do it. It's crazy. And so it's easy to come in and do the crazy fun stuff and people clap and cheer. I mean, sometimes I show up on TNG and they've been working for 5 days straight, overtime, and it's a smoky set and they're tired. But when I show up, it's been pretty cool because it's like, oh, good. Energy goes, the whole crew is like, oh, we're going to kill someone today.
Yeah.
Danger's there. Let's go. So it's kind of an uplift. I'm like the candy man that shows up with the candy truck and the ice cream truck and just so it's easy. The crew, I always look up to everyone. The crew just does they're the ones putting in the 16 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So I always look up to them and bring them good energy and always thank them for their hard work because they're the ones that are really, working all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
You're like a breath
Dennis.
of fresh air, Dennis. We love you, man.
Absolutely. And we really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us. Very quickly, I do want to say that you reminded me, I did do a lot of stunts back in the day. I say back in the day, but you've been doing them for like 30 or 40 years. But and on a show I did a lot of stunts for was Deadliest Warrior. And I said the same thing you said, which is we're knights out in the mud and the rain, and we're using swords and just destroying each other. And I remember thinking, it's like playing with sticks in your backyard as a kid, and you're destroying things and you're ruining things, and you don't have to worry about anything. It's not your stuff. You when you're done, you take it off. They deal with broken swords and shields and everything. It's the most fun thing as long as you're trained. Obviously, huge caveat there. Everybody be careful and don't do anything ridiculous. But Dennis, really appreciate you. You're always such a huge breath of fresh air. We love you and your work, and we really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so much for hanging out.
I love you guys, and keep having fun, okay?
We will, with sticks in our backyard. Everybody at home,
some of that.
Stick around. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week. God, Dennis Madalone is so freaking cool. Here they are. Worf and Beverly enjoy a nice meal at a Rutia 4 cafe. Beverly Crusher tells Lieutenant Worf to get her something with alcohol in it. The Ansanta separatists want to free themselves from the rule of the Eastern Continent. Wesley wants to go on an away mission. Strength may be useless when faced with terrorism. The Ansata, that's what it was. The Ansata transport through a dimensional shift. Alexana Devos's predecessors were murdered. In a world where children blow up children, everyone's a threat. Kirill Finn should be drawing, not killing. Katik Shah is a waiter for the Lumar Cafe. This is the year of the Irish unification. And the Enterprise gets a carpet change. Wow, that was a mouthful. A lot of names to memorize there. So real quick, just to set the stage, apparently this is the first day with a new carpet on the Enterprise, the one that they stuck with for the remaining 4.5 seasons. This was originally written, it was based in the Revolutionary War for Melinda M. Snodgrass, and then it became more about apparently the Irish, war that was going on there and the terrorism that was going on there. That's why they mentioned in the year 2024 that there's an Irish unification. So look forward to that, everybody. That's going to happen this year at some point. There's a lot of stuff in history here. I was looking up some other things. There was a scene in this episode, Cirroc, that was banned in the UK because of that Irish thing. I'll look up that scene. Here it is. Because it was about the IRA, right? The Irish Republican Army, the provisional whatever, reunification of Ireland in 2024, blah, blah, blah. But what does Data say? I don't remember exactly what he says, but he says something about that. I'll have to look it up again, but it's really interesting. Anyway, so much stuff behind this one. What are your thoughts?
I think it was around Data asking about the acceptability of terrorism. There was a point where
that was exactly it,
yeah. I wrote that in my notes. He was basically saying, is it acceptable under certain conditions to... And Picard's response was pretty good too, because he was like, well, that's what we're trying to find. That's what human civilization's been trying to figure out this whole time. Where is that line?
Still haven't figured it out. And here is the quote, the full thing. Well, no, that's not it. But anyway, that was exactly the scene that you're talking about, Cirroc. And it's really interesting because here it is. Data says, but if that is so, Captain, why are their methods so often unsuccessful? Or why are they so successful? I've been reviewing the history of armed rebellion, and it appears that terrorism is an effective way to promote political change. Picard responds, yes, it can be, but I have never subscribed to the idea that political power flows from the barrel of a gun. But anyway, that's just a small part of it. But yes, that was the scene. It was like a full minute and change that was banned in the UK starting in, I think, 2007, something like that.
I can see why. Because it's controversial. It almost excuses. It doesn't excuse, but it offers an excuse or a reason or a rationale. And we're currently and always, I think, in a kind of cyclical way, going to be revisiting this particular subject matter. It's in the headlines now, and I don't think it's going to be going away anytime soon, because there's always going to be this argument about oppress versus oppressor, and what are the appropriate measures to take to try to affect change. This episode was well written. I thought that, this character that was played by, or this main character who was the villain, what was his name? Oh, Finn.
Yeah.
Carol Finn. not to be confused with Errol Flynn, but Carol Finn.
Or Claire Finn. Claire Finn was played by Penny Johnson-Gerald. That is the doctor on the Orville.
Exactly, not to be confused with those. No,
with any of those.
None of them. But
or
no,
Flynn
I mean,
Rider for you Disney fans out there.
This is, you mentioned earlier about this being the first episode written by a woman and then directed by a woman. Gabrielle Beaumont is the first woman to direct an episode of Star Trek. I think I worked with her on Deep Space Nine as well, because when I looked her up, she did it was familiar to me, having interacted with her. But Melinda Snodgrass is an exceptional writer that is just, she does what I think Star Trek is really best at, and that is taking very relevant, real headlines and making them and adapting them into a future tense, into a science fiction tense. And, because themes are always going to be around, it's practical, and it also makes us relate to it when you watch it. You're like, oh, this is something that I can identify with thematically, because it's something that has either happened in recent history or is currently happening.
Yeah. And another great thing about Melinda, and I kept thinking about how great she is. The directing was great. Also, to complete the trifecta, the female lead in this, in this episode, or I could say, besides Beverly Crusher, but the female guest star is more what I mean, was, she's like the leader of the military, and it's also a lady, right? And then you have Beverly Crusher doing her thing, and it was just very woman-centric, female-centric, and they're all killing it in their roles, every single one of them, the writing, the directing, the acting. But the great thing about Melinda, you can tell she's an attorney, right? Because in every episode we've seen, what does she do? She presents arguments from all angles.
Yes.
But what she did not do in this episode was provide an answer or a solution. In The Measure of a Man, she gave all points, but then she kind of gave a conclusion that Data is a sentient human, like that, right? And in previous episodes, she does such a great job. That's what attorneys do. They have to be able to argue something they agree with. They also have to be able to argue something that they vehemently disagree with, just because that's their job. And so she's able to present both sides of an argument. And it really makes for compelling television to be able to do that, because if you're only presenting one side, it's fine, it's cool, could be fun or interesting. But this really makes you think when she does that.
Yeah, and when I find myself writing down lines of an episode, like literally recopying lines
constantly,
that's when I know it's well written. Because otherwise I just, I'm like, oh, I'll write down a theme, I'll write down a performance, I'll talk about the framing of the shot. I might think about other aspects or even the music. But when I'm actually writing down the words, because I think the words are resonating and they ring true to me, that's when I think, oh, this person who's writing this episode has hit a nerve where I feel compelled to rewrite the words that they wrote. And I'll give you an example of that. This episode was laced with great performances. Beverly gave some amazing performances in this episode. Gates McFadden was exceptionally good in this episode. I have a whole kind of different respect for how good she is as an actor. And the other person that I thought had a great moment, and maybe not necessarily the whole time I really liked this performance, but this window was really good, and that's the general or commander character in this episode, who's pursuing all of the terrorist, in this episode.
Yeah, her name is Alexana, uh, whatever it was.
That's the character name, or
yeah, Alexana Devos. That was the character name. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, what the scene that I thought she just killed was the scene with her and Riker, right? When Riker says, "Is that what you want?" And then she goes into
Agreed.
what I want, and then she goes into is to go home, back to my own country, to leave behind the roundups, the interrogations, the bodies lying in the street. That's Melinda Snodgrass killing it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I had to write all of that. So, and the performance was equally as good as the verbiage, in my opinion, because she was standing strong to Riker. And the way she closed it off with, "That's what I want, Riker," the way she said it was just, it came from a very genuine place to me. And I thought it was super well delivered.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that scene very much. And that was Melinda Snodgrass all over. When she says, "I considered myself a moderate." And he says, "What changed your mind?" And she says, "Being here for 6 months, watching the body count grow, the 3 assassination attempts on my life." And he goes, "Well, that'll change your point of view." By the way, I saw a couple Riker maneuvers when he was fighting and swinging. He was like fixing his shirt. But then she says, "Terrorist bomb blew up a school, killed 60 children, and Sada said it was an accident." But there was a lot of gray. I mean, this is what she does, Melinda. She doesn't just point out every angle of everything, but it leaves you basically saying, well, now I'm just sitting here in the gray area, which is what life is. Life is not black and white. Life is not a 1 or a 0. Life is everything that happens in the gray area. And she really leaves us there. Me too. I wrote down a million lines. I wrote down too many notes for this one.
It was just too much. And then even the idea that when they captured Picard, and one of his demands was, when he pops up and tells Troy, "I'll tell him I want an economic embargo. I want a full blockade." These are actually real life mechanisms that are used in order to inflict punishment on governments, on countries. And so I thought that was also resonated with me as well. The fact that it wasn't just a terrorist saying, "And I want a helicopter, and I want $1 million in gold bricks." This wasn't like something that you argue for some material thing. This was like a real kind of impactful way to impose suffering on this country. So I thought that was also a nail hit on the head by Melinda Snodgrass.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, there was one other point totally different, which was when they think they might die, Beverly says, "Jean-Luc, there are some things I have to tell you." She gets serious. She calls him Jean-Luc, not Captain.
Yeah.
She caresses his ear. Maybe she didn't do that, but that's what I pictured. But basically, that was what I think we're supposed to believe, that she was going to tell him something a little bit more profound, a little serious, a little more personal. And that's just a tiny bit of a little nugget for us to lean in and go, what was she gonna say? It just could have been anything. She could have just said, "My important belongings are in a safe with the code 345. If I die, give that to Wesley." Cool. But it could be, "I want to have your baby and call him Jack Picard and run away, and come back in Picard season 3." We don't know.
I think that's what she was about to say, and they cut it off. But yeah, I thought that was great. Really enjoyed the scenes between them. She brings out a little different dynamic in Picard. There's a the warming up that he does when he's just alone in a room with her, and there's just the two of them. There's a softening. There's a real kind of vulnerability that opens up on Picard that I like. And then also to switch pace again, there was another point in this episode, words wise, where she says, "These are not people. They're animals. They're animals we're dealing with here. Fanatics who kill with no remorse or conscience." But the idea of these are not people, they're animals. Mm-hmm. The dehumanization, I thought that's another accurate thing that we see when we get into these particular kinds of conflicts. We always see a dehumanization aspect on either one or both sides, where it's like those people are not even, they don't even have any, regulator. They're just not even human. They're like animals. Yeah. And once you start to dehumanize people, then there is no, you can do anything to them. Mm-hmm. Slaughter, you can exterminate, and I think that's one of the first steps of a very long, steep downward decline, is when you start to dehumanize people and you don't look at them as people who have the same kinds of interests, goals, life experiences, life expecting, dreams, aspirations, mm-hmm. as anybody else.
That really is step one to destroying your enemy, or convincing your people to destroy your enemy, is to dehumanize your enemy. You other them, you dehumanize them. Once you can convince these people that they're not human, they're not like us, they're not really, they're this or they're that. Once you do that, then anything goes. You could literally then, no, it's just, that's always step one. And the second anybody is dehumanizing other people, that should be the biggest red flag that, no, we are all humans. There is no dehumanization of any human. That's a very important point that you bring up there. Yeah. Also, very quickly, there was a really long quote that I was just like, this thing feels like it hit a history book to me. Like everything I ever learned in the course of every history class I ever took was basically summed up right here when he says, the lady says, "How much blood was spilled in the history of your federation, Doctor? How many good and noble..." Oh, no, this was Flynn who says it. "How much blood was spilled in the history of your federation, Doctor? How many good and noble societies have bombed civilians in war, have wiped out whole cities, and now that you enjoy the comfort that has come from their battles, their killing, you frown on my immortality, and in the finest tradition of your own great civilization, I'm willing to kill for it too." Or wait, so basically what he's saying is like, look, it's easy for you to say what I'm doing is horrible, because it is, but almost every race in the history of the world has done atrocities, and just because they've moved past it and they can now pass judgment on others, the key is, well, and they're right, I agree, but bad things are bad things, but you always have to remember that in your own history you also did some horrible things, and nobody's hands are completely clean. So I kind of butchered that quote, but it's a great one.
Yeah, it's a morality play, because there was a moral high ground that Dr. Crusher was trying to take in this particular instance, and he was trying to, and he did, dislodge her from that high ground and say, "Get off that high horse, because here's a mirror, and we can look at what you've done to get to where you are." And it's easy to say that now. He also mentioned about one person's terrorist is another person's martyr or hero. General. Yeah. So there was all of those kinds of parallels made, and very accurate ones too. By the way, we keep seeing this theme play out now as we're living.
That was the biggest line. The difference between terrorists and generals is only the difference between winners and losers. And that's really what it is. History is written by the victors, and we all know that. And that was the beginning of the quote that I mentioned there. That's kind of really what raised my eyebrows, because I was like, yep, that's, you win, then you paint yourself as the good guy. But look, speaking of good guys, oh wait, not quite yet. Real quick, home run of the episode. What do you say?
I'm giving the home run to it's hard. It's hard to give the home run in this episode. Actually, now that I think about it, I would say Melinda Snodgrass deserves it. Because I think the writing is so exceptional. But performance-wise, I loved Gates McFadden in this episode. I thought she was really, when she was quiet and not responding to the guy who captured her, I loved just the quietness and the facial expressions. I thought were amazing. And when she opened up to Picard, I thought that was, I thought she just did a great job when she came into the moment when she says, "I have a son."
I know.
The way she said
great.
that.
That was the whole thing right there. Yep.
That got me. So I'm going to give out Melinda Snodgrass for writing and Gates McFadden for performance.
So for me, it's I want to go with the duo of Melinda Snodgrass and Gabrielle Beaumont. Great stuff all around for everything that we just mentioned. Also, some great people are the following: Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Titus Mohler, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Goo, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, my live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, the Dark Lord Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manasfi, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, David Gregory, Tim Baum, a.k.a. Grandpa One, and of course, the one and only Jason Okun. Stick around, everybody. Here comes the free-for-all. Wish I could do the trivioids that well instead of butchering all the names. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. It is time for the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Yo.
Ooh. We are joined by Jason M. Okun, who knows everything about writing and directing. Eve England is out in Wales, I bet. Justin
Indeed.
Weir, Shag 840 with his Chucky doll and a cat tail.
Yay!
And we've got the Dark Lord, Chris McGee, Darmok, and Jalad at Tanagra. Wearing that shirt, that is. All right, everybody. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I will say like a 7-7.
The George Mirasan vote. Got it.
Yeah, 7.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
7-1.
6.9.
What did you say, Justin?
7-2.
Chris?
I was actually going to guess 7-2 myself, so.
Wow, all within that little region. The answer, of course, is you guys are actually really close. It is 6.8. 6.8. I was a little surprised. I expected it to be much higher than that, honestly. But maybe that's just because, again, some things age well, and maybe the rating goes up and up and up over time, or maybe it goes down or something like that. But did we have any non-appearance mentions today? I mean, George Washington, but I don't think we ever see him. Right? We don't see him in Star Trek. No? Okay. Any some kinds of or some sort of?
I didn't hear any.
All right. Well, Melissa Longo, we got no non-appearance mentions, but why don't you get us started off on the right track? What did you think of this episode? Excellent behind-the-scenes picture behind you, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I thought I was reading up on this episode and thought it was fun that this is the first Star Trek episode that had both a woman director and a woman writer, Melinda Snodgrass and Gabriel Beaumont as the director. So that was pretty rad. But to be honest, I found this episode to be exhausting. Not because not because it was a bad episode, but because of the subject matter it deals with. I think Gates McFadden, for me, hit the home run in this episode. I think she's fabulous. I think she's wonderful as Beverly, and Beverly Crusher is becoming one of my favorite characters just because Gates is amazing. But I found this exhausting because it parallels too many stories that we see daily, and the strife and fighting and violence and all of that stuff just really gets exhausting. It's frustrating, and I think this episode really points out some, again, Star Trek is really wonderful at this, at pointing out or asking unanswerable questions. And the question, I think, is how do we make it stop? How do we stop the need for human beings to stop wanting to control each other all the time, or oppress each other all the time, or fight each other all the time? The fighting is just exhausting. And yeah, so that's what this episode kind of stoked for me. I'm kind of exhausted by it all. Yeah. That's
understood. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Melissa. Good stuff from you. Jason M. Okun has actually never been exhausted in his life. It's weird. I don't understand it, but what did you think of this episode?
Well, for me, in a way, it's a mixed bag. I guess for the second week in a row, the show certainly aims high at these very interesting topics, and I guess in a way you can say it hits the target in a way it misses the target, differently perhaps than The Hunted. But the whole subject of terrorism is certainly interesting, and sort of a subject that we deal with almost on a daily basis in the world. It was the case in the 1980s. It certainly is the case now, maybe in a different way. And if you look at this, as what is the show really trying to tell us? It goes through sort of these issues of terrorism, and is it justified, not justified? It tries to take a balanced point of view, or at least makes a solid attempt to do it. And maybe it's my own biased view, but sometimes when you're dealing with a subject like terrorism, maybe you do not want to take a balanced point of view, especially on the side of terrorists. And you can justify anything, and certainly it's been done throughout history. The bad doers do it on a daily basis. You turn on the television, you see it all the time. But the question is, are you justifying anything, or can it even be justified? Should it be justified? Is it something we should give credence to? And as years went by, I think my view of this episode is sort of my reaction to it changed. I used to be a lot higher on it than I am now. Maybe as I got older and as I got to see different things. I mean, not every situation with terrorism is alike. I mean, this certainly was Northern Ireland sort of parallel when it was done. But if you look at other sort of forms of terrorism throughout the world, you can look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is another example. And I'm not sure you can call these sort of different situations alike, and you can't treat them alike. It just creates, frankly, an uncomfortable feeling. I mean, Melissa, you said it's kind of difficult and tiring to watch. I think it makes me uncomfortable in a way that it certainly makes you think, but I'm not sure what this episode is telling me. I mean, if you want to give it high marks for taking on the subject, it certainly gets a medal for participating. It hits on various different points. It even goes into the Stockholm syndrome, if you want to go that way.
It did.
but I'm not sure where it leaves me. I mean, in a way, having sort of the end with the boy putting down his gun, it shows you what Star Trek often does, gives us sort of a hope for the future. So I'm glad it ended that way. Does it change anything? I don't know, but at least it's consistent with the message of Star Trek as it should be. I think, there's a lot more to say about it, and I'll save that for later, but at least visually, we're watching something that's interesting. It's Gabriel Beaumont did shot the episode pretty well. So things are moving along, and it makes watching it a little bit easier. I think, the star of this, perhaps to some degree, in addition to excellent performances in Gates, it may be one of Gates' best performances in 6 years that she was on the show. I think, a big star of this episode is also the score. And we can talk about some of that later, but it's just, it strikes you immediately as you see the establishing shot of the planet. You notice the music immediately, and it kind of go throughout. I'll save a lot of that for later, but it's a complicated show. I'm conflicted about it, and I probably will be. And, that's why the score, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the IMDb score kept going down over the years as we see more and more terrorism kind of touch us, because frankly, in the late 1980s, at least people in the U.S. watched it from a distance. And I don't think we can do that anymore, certainly not after 9/11.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Jason Okun. The first guy ever to mention the word score twice in one sentence with two different meanings. So that worked out well for us. Eve England is out in Wales. What did you think of this particular episode?
Yeah, I think I had sort of similar sort of ups and downs watching this. It definitely felt uncomfortable in light of recent events and things that we've seen in the last 20 years. Yeah, and I agree. It was kind of uncomfortable. You were watching it and I didn't really know where it was going in terms of the sort of narrative. And I think I was just overall, having seen the way that Deep Space Nine, for example, deals with terrorism and issues of that, I think it sort of highlighted how this episode didn't quite live up to that that it's such a, as you said, it's such a huge topic for them to even consider doing, but it sort of falls short. It's a bit naive. It doesn't really go back to the roots of why people do what they do. And I think what you just said was interesting. Thinking of the US at that time, you hadn't really experienced terrorism, whereas growing up in the 80s and 90s in the UK, you were worried when you went to London because you might be bombed because the IRA was such that it was so arbitrary and so random. You just never felt safe when you went to the city as a sort of British person. So I felt, and what I sort of almost was quite shocked at, that they mentioned, or Data mentions, the unification of Ireland in 2024 as an example of successful terrorism. And I was like, hold on a second, this was pretty, I don't know, difficult. That must have been quite difficult at the time, because that kind of suggested that the IRA was going to win based on what Data said in terms of this future. So actually, I did Google it then after that, because I said that can't have landed that well in the in Britain at that time. And apparently, it wasn't shown in its full form until 2007 on the BBC.
It was banned, that scene.
So that's because when I was, and obviously it's a long time since we've had to really sort of had that sort of directness to Northern Ireland, although obviously there's still repercussions today. But that struck me completely. It jumped out right away when Data said that, and I thought, okay, that's quite interesting. But then it's interesting watching it back on the lens of now that there's we are seeing more and more terrorism and it's much more global, that I think you do look at this episode differently to possibly how it was then perceived and pulled together based on this sort of abstract concept of, like I said, a remoteness of Northern Ireland that sort of America had. So it was I thought it was really interesting. It was an interesting topic. It didn't quite work for me, but I think the context really has sort of changed how you view it. So watching it for the first time, I obviously had all of that context, whereas it probably would have been more popular, I would suspect, originally when it came out than what people are looking at it now. So that was my overall thing. I just love Picard punching that guy. I thought that was really cool. We need to see more of that sort of ballsy, Picard.
Yeah. Dennis Madalone was with us earlier, and he did explain a bit of that scene. He was very pleased with that, as were we. I could totally picture Eve being like, hold on a second, pause, Google. Did the IRA really win? Like, she's like, I'm old enough to remember that happen. I don't remember it happening that way. You were like one, I think, is all I'm saying. Justin Weir is here wearing his awesome It's a Jake shirt. What did you think of this one, Justin?
Hi. I'm also wearing my Walking Art Made by Melissa hoodie.
Hey.
And my cat keeps going to town on the zipper. But so I watched this episode 3 times today because I was working and I knew I was going to get off early. So I had it on in the background as I'm doing my thing. And it started off with, yes, this is a great episode because there's a lot of awesome moments. I love the action stuff, that explosion in the beginning, Picard punching the dude, Geordi jumping out of the phaser fire. But then after my second or third watch, I'm like, once those scenes kind of settled and I'm really thinking about the episode, I agree with Jason a lot. Because we really there was no really ending. Like, it kind of just presented the terrorism stuff. And it gave us lots of great points, I thought. But we didn't really learn nothing really was resolved at the end, except for maybe the little boy putting the gun down, but that was it. So we're kind of like, okay, we got Beverly back, but they're still going to fight on. But I think my favorite part of the episode was just Data. We see the world through an innocent boy's eyes, Data, asking the questions like, he can't understand. He can't fathom how these people are doing these those jumps that are harming them. He's like, I don't understand how people can do that. Like, and then I also enjoyed Data questioning about terrorism and Picard saying, like, these are questions that humanity has been struggling with throughout history. Random. I was just watching the end. The kid who puts the gun down, he had a little streak of white hair, just like the main boss guy did. Did anyone catch that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good detail.
I think they all did, yeah.
I think Beverly was amazing. She looked beautiful, and her acting was very believable, I thought. Like, when he mentioned that Wes was on the ship, like, that whole breakdown. And, yeah, the score was awesome. Yeah, I don't really have much to say. I don't know if I like it or if I don't like it. It's kind of just, it's there, you know?
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Completely understood. Thank you very much, Justin Weir. And everybody at home knows that's how you can tell they're not humans. If they have like a streak in their hair, or if they wear like a purple shirt. Oh, wait, no, it's Rock's purple. Like green pants or something. Like, no, they're not human. Look at their outfit. That's not a human. Anyway, Chris McGee is definitely a human and one of the best models of one we've ever known. What did you think of this episode?
Dark Lord is a model for a human for you. That's interesting to know. Well, as everyone has already said, it certainly was a different experience watching this episode today as opposed to 3 decades ago. I'll tell you one thing in all my viewings of this episode in the past, something I never noticed before last night was Devos describing the terrorists as animals so early in the episode. And I never caught it before, but that is definitely, I think, a foreshadowing how she deals with Finn in the end. Just perceiving them as animals that need to be put down. Also, during that same discussion, Devos said that 70 years ago, the Ansata were denied independence, which gave them a noble cause, but now that's just an excuse for more violence. She failed to elaborate, however, and Riker failed to ask if the Ansata were ever given the independence they sought. Now, according to Finn, they haven't. But maybe perhaps it's just another one of those matters of internal security that the Federation isn't supposed to get involved in, just like we heard about in the previous episode. And as Eve mentioned, I loved seeing Picard finally get a chance to demonstrate fist negotiation. I do have some nitpicks, but I will save them for things left unsaid. Instead, I'll close with my what I think is the most memorable quote of the episode to me. It's an imperfect solution for an imperfect world.
Great stuff. Reminds me of First Contact. You're an imperfect being created by an imperfect being. Isn't that from First Contact, I think? The movie, not the episode, Eve. Eve's like, I haven't watched either. Don't care. Anyway, right? She's like, I don't know, whatever. Jake's final take. Cirroc Lofton, your final thoughts on this episode?
Well, one thing was, I did think that certain things rang true for me. One of them was that nobody seemed to be happy. And that seems to be the case. The one side was miserable because they had living in fear of explosions and noises, and they wanted to be able to walk down the street without security. And the other side is miserable because they are avenging whatever grievances they feel like have been inflicted on them. And I don't see happiness anywhere in this particular thing. And that's what is kind of disturbing about it. The other thing that jumped out to me was the quote that was used about fear being a weapon. And he was like, is that the only weapon you have? Crusher said. And he was like, no, but it's a good one. And it is a good one. Fear as a weapon. I also thought that it was super creepy when the guy hands a bunch of pictures that he drew of her. I'm like,
yes, we forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
everybody
like
wants their terrorist captive to draw pictures and be like,
yeah,
am I that bad of a guy? I've been drawing you this whole time.
Yeah, here's some softcore photos of, hand sketches that I've been doing. And look how supple your hands are in this one look. I mean, seriously, that's not a turn on for me, and it doesn't make me endear myself to you. It makes me think you're a kind of a weirdo creep that's been drawing me when I'm sleeping. So that doesn't really work well for me. I also wanted to say that I thought it was funny in the beginning when Riker and Picard are arguing, are having this discussion about, like, you got to tell her I'm not talking to Crusher. No, I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be the one to greet her when she gets here. Like, they literally were fearful of, overriding her decision and saying, no, you got to come back. It was hilarious to watch them kind of go back and forth. And then also, like I said, I want to agree with everybody else about Gates McFadden and her performance. I thought it was probably the best I've seen. She did so many good things. Her silence when she was in captivity was loud as far as her performance. And the moment when she reconnects with her son at the end, I felt that to be a genuine feeling of love that a mother would have, kind of like seeing that her son is okay. The way she spoke about Wesley when she said, he's got good role models, little things like that. I thought she just kept hitting the nail on the head and delivering a very heartfelt, passionate performance without doing much on her face. It was just like very stoic, and I really loved that about it. And then, I wanted to just also give a little shout out to the costume design. I did like some of those blue uniforms. They did look a little hybrid, futuristic, kind of a spin-off of some kind of a Starfleet uniform to some degree. So
didn't they look like Babylon 5 to anybody or something? I don't remember.
It looked like
it reminded
something else.
It reminded me of another sci-fi show.
It reminded me of Orville, I thought.
Which one?
The Orville.
The Orville, exactly. That's what I kind of thought of as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. John Elway had a theorem that they used
I know.
in this, the Elway theory for dimensional shifting.
There's the NAM.
And yeah, there's a NAM for John Elway.
Wow.
But yeah, no, this was difficult to watch. You know, it's hard to you know, watch this episode and not have certain buttons pushed. The lot of location kind of maybe diminished the score to some degree a little bit. And then also the thing that rang true to me was the Federation's participation in supplying medical supplies actually did mean its involvement. And so that actually rang true to me as well, as we see in, you know, in real life, how these things kind of play out. So very thought-provoking episode. And I guess that's, you know, that's what you walk away with. If you walk away feeling these kinds of ways, talking about all these kinds of things, whether you agree with it, disagree with it, it still ignites the thoughts. Mm-hmm. And that's where I would give Melinda Snodgrass very high marks for taking on difficult subject matter and not being afraid to explore it. And certainly having lines that ring true. A dead martyr is worth 10 posturing leaders. These are the sentiments that somebody would have in that position. And so that's not inaccurate to me. It's just unnerving. So that's my final take.
Great stuff. Thanks, Cirroc. All right, that's it for us, everybody. God, I feel like there's way more to talk about. Well, lucky for us, we got another segment right after this. Everybody, if you are a patron of the Seventh Rule, check out Things Left Unsaid right after this. Until then, thank you very much to Jason M. Okun for joining us, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Eve England, Melissa Longo. For myself, Cirroc, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, thank you all for hanging out with us. And until then, always remember the Seventh Rule.